I can remember that day like it was yesterday, and,
Mhm.
it it's, it's a sucker punch, and when you get that diagnosis, when you have no like I said, no symptoms or no expectations, that I'm in ill health or anything like that, and, it takes a couple of weeks for you to get your head wrapped around a diagnosis of cancer.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lori Stevick Rust. 40 years of sitting with people through their hardest moments has taught me one thing: our power lives in our courage to be real. This is where we stop pretending and we find our way back to ourselves. I'm glad you're here. Now pull up a chair. This is Becoming Real. Prostate cancer came into our lives several years ago, and we're here today to share that story. My husband, Jay, has been gracious enough to be willing to talk about the whole journey with prostate cancer so that hopefully listeners out there can glean some information. Maybe it raises a red flag and it gets people to pay attention to the importance of early detection. So, with that, let me introduce my incredible, wonderful, sexy, beautiful husband, Jay Rust, sharing in a very vulnerable, honest way our journey with prostate cancer.
Well, thanks for having me, babe. I think in this journey, we both have kind of agreed to try and share the story at various parts of that process so that we can maybe expand the awareness for men. I know that many men in my demographic of baby boomers don't tend to talk about personal
Mhm.
things or healthcare things or let those types of I'll say sensitive issues. And my point in being able to do this is to hopefully get men to pay attention more to all the various healthcare screenings and physicals and trips to the doctor when their body is telling them there's something wrong, and even when the body isn't telling them that there's
Mhm.
something wrong. Uh,
Yeah, I know one of the things that when we were sharing this story is that you're a healthy guy and in good shape and had no symptoms. And so it was really only by probably the grace of God and fortuitous that you had your PSA tested.
I will say being in good physical shape with the diagnoses and some of the treatments that I've had
Mhm.
has allowed me to recover quicker, to endure some of these surgeries and challenges and things. I drag race for fun and pleasure, and I have to have a NHRA license.
Is that
And
really what it is though, fun and pleasure?
yeah, well, for me it is.
Okay.
But the licensing requirements for the car that I drive is, you have to have a physical and every 3 years. So I had 0 symptoms and had been feeling good, and my license renewal came in the mail, and I called the doctor and set up an appointment for a routine physical, and, he had tested me the prior licensing physical and found that my PSA was normal 3 years prior and wasn't even gonna retest me, and he asked me one question before he was just gonna pass on the blood panel and not recommend a PSA. He asked me about if I have any family history, and I said, "Yeah, I
Mhm.
do. My, older brother has, unfortunately been battling through, prostate cancer." So he said, "Well, then let's just throw that into the panel and see what happens." And he sent me a text message and called me like immediately the next day and said, "We've got a problem and we need to talk because your reading 0 to 4 is the normal." And
Mhm.
my reading was 26.4. And that's how the journey began.
Yeah. And again, really did hit us from the blind side because I don't think in the absence of symptoms, when you came home and said, I just got a phone call and this is what my numbers look like. And of course, I didn't know anything about the numbers and what they mean and what should be we should be alarmed about. And so I think like many conditions, it hits a family when you go, there was the before and then the after, like life before the diagnosis and then after the diagnosis. And at that point, we really just launched right into the treatments. And for you, it was surgery.
No symptoms or no expectations, that I'm in ill health or anything like that. And it takes a couple of weeks for you to get your head wrapped around a diagnosis of cancer. Yeah, it was definitely I can remember that day like it was yesterday, and,
Mhm.
it it's, it's a sucker punch, and when you get that diagnosis, when you have no symptoms or no expectations, that I'm in ill health or anything like that, and, it takes a couple of weeks for you to get your head wrapped around a diagnosis of cancer. and we shared that journey together, and, you know, we held hands a lot, we talked a lot, we cried a lot, and once we got that out of our system after a couple of weeks, it was like, "Okay, now we gotta go. Now it's go
Mhm.
time." And, fortunately, we have a good network of people in the healthcare industry that
Mm.
we were able to reach out very quickly, some of the best in Cleveland, and, get on their schedules right away. At least it was our elective opinion. We could have done radiation or surgery, and, our feeling personally was, if I got cancer in my body,
Get it out.
I get it out.
Get it out.
Get it
Get it
out.
out.
So,
Mhm.
we agreed wholeheartedly on that, and so I had the surgery in late June of 2024, and, the margins were clean and everything that the doctor took out that they tested during the surgical process, and pretty good prognosis when I came out. And we that was June of 24, and we got into early 2025, and the cancer came back for me. And that was all indicated by, follow-up PSA tests that we were doing every 3 months after surgery. Another gut punch that, we thought we had it squared away.
But for us, it became, wait, the margins were clean. And I remember the surgeon coming out and saying to me, like, wide margins, that no cancer. And we went as far out as we could go, and there was no evidence. And again, this is more of a commentary, I think, on emotionally what that feels like,
Right.
that I really thought, "Okay, good. This was a bump. We're done. It's finished." And so when it came back and realizing that, you had metastatic disease, like it had gotten out of the capsule, not to other organs, but just outside of the margins of the capsule of the prostate. So we then knew there was going to be more involved
Yeah,
than we originally had thought.
right. So I went through 33 consecutive radiation treatments, and the follow on to that was we elected to do hormone deprivation therapy. And
Because the testosterone, as they explained it to us, was actually feeding the cells. And so if there were any microscopic cells anywhere in the body, having testosterone was that fuel to develop and potentially make the cancer cells grow, which of course, that by itself is yet another thing for a man to have to go through, is to we're going to just deplete you of all of your testosterone, as if 33 rounds of radiation wasn't enough. We'll just get rid of all of your testosterone
yeah,
too.
right. Yeah. And it's a tough process, but the radiation itself, I'll say, was the procedures were not all that difficult, surprisingly. The preparation and things like that were a bit of a challenge, and anybody that's ever been through that understands exactly what I'm talking about, because they have to regulate, a lot of your bodily functions to be
Mhm.
everything out of the way so that they don't hit areas in your body internally with radiation
Mhm.
that they're not supposed to, because you can have some catastrophic
Mm.
problems with
So
that.
bowel and bladder management
Right,
was really important throughout the process.
right.
And again, these are the things that I know for all people, but particularly for men, I think, to have to talk about areas of a body that is so sensitive and personal. And I think at least some of the men that I've talked to throughout this journey is why they avoid it. It's why they avoid getting tested. It's why they keep the information to themselves. It's why if they're having side effects from the radiation or the surgery with their bladder or sexual function, they keep it to themselves. And I think one of the beautiful things about you, there's so many, but is your willingness to be vulnerable and talk about, the things that are just part of our body that can keep you from being completely isolated if you're not sharing it and talking about it openly, as these are the things that happen. These are the consequences, side effects, things that there are ways to navigate around.
Yeah, I mean, through the first initial surgery, and then the radiation, and then the hormone deprivation therapy, there's a variety of changes in sexual function, yeah, and it ebbs and flows, and it's a hard thing to I guess, come to terms with for a
Mhm.
guy. It's a
Mhm.
lot of our identity, and but I guess that I've always tried to wrap my head around it and say, here's the alternative. You can either not be alive, or you can have some changes in your sexual function. And,
Mhm.
we have a beautiful relationship. We
Mhm.
have beautiful children. We have beautiful grandchildren. None of us get off of this rock alive. And all we try to do when we're diagnosed with challenging health diagnoses is to live as long as we can to enjoy the things that we're blessed with while we're on this earth. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
For listeners who either haven't had PSAs tested or are thinking, oh gosh, I listened to this podcast and it reminded me, which is what I hope happens, reminded me that I need to get a PSA tested. Making sure that our listeners are paying attention to getting these things checked because you can't wait for symptoms, particularly around prostate cancer. But separate from that, is there anything that you would say to men who are listening out there who are saying, I know I need to do this, but I don't want to even think about all that comes after the procedures and the surgeries and the radiation and options like that? Things that you might say to them about getting good care for themselves.
Sure. I think just men in general, as I had mentioned earlier, tend to not really pay attention to themselves and their health. I think that's a pretty solid reason why men don't live as long statistically as women do in the U.S. anyhow. And
We're really just we're just stronger in general, but that's okay.
well, we tend to make a lot of bad choices too, and we don't
That's
learn from
true.
those.
That's true.
But the thing for me is, I think the message would be to men is to really pay attention to your body. We always, at least in our generation, my generation, we were always taught to blow things off. Don't be a crybaby. Don't be a this. Don't be a that. You're weak. The key to any health issue, especially with cancer, is to catch it early. It can be life saving and life changing. When I posted originally on Facebook, I've got quite a few friends, and there was a number of men. Once I put it out there, I'm going to say dozens and dozens and dozens of guys that I
Mhm.
know through Facebook and personally that never even told me about it. But once I put it out there,
Yeah.
they were free to open up and say, hey,
Mhm.
gosh, I had this happen to me and I
Mhm.
did this. And one other gentleman was the same thing. He was an NHRA racer and he had the same thing. He had no symptoms, but he had to go in for his routine physical. And that fact alone saved his life and it saved mine. So pay attention to your body, do yourself a favor, and do your family a favor.
Now let me tell you something that I'm curious about what drove you crazy in this process or what annoyed you in the process. I'm gonna tell you what annoyed me because you
Oh,
mentioned sharing no, it wasn't you. But when you were sharing about telling our story, how many people had a misunderstanding, and I get it, about prostate cancer would say, "Oh, you know, it's if you're gonna have any cancer,
right.
that's the one to have. It's treatable, it's curable. You put those seeds in or you without a full understanding that there is a lot to know about prostate cancer. And not all prostate cancer is the same. Not all cell types are the same. We had to do genetics on that, that there is a lot to know. And so what annoyed me was it was almost like just
Mm,
that little thing while we're sitting over here with cancer that had spread with cells that are very aggressive. We knew our journey wasn't going to be, oh, that little thing, and then you're cured. Like, okay, so they're keeping an eye on prostate cancer for some people, but for other people, it's aggressive surgery and hormone therapy and radiation, which is exactly what we had to do to save Jay's life.
so,
Right.
yeah, and I
So, what
think,
annoyed you?
well, that initial, when you disclose your diagnosis of cancer, I think most people don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And especially with prostate cancer, the public perception is that it is super treatable. It's nothing to worry about. And
Hmm.
I can't begin to tell you how many times I heard that. I think people's heart is in the right
I
place.
agree. I agree.
They're trying to give you encouragement and
Yes.
give you reason to not be in despair. I get that.
Hmm.
But it's also very disheartening because it almost kind of feels dismissive because
Hmm.
we're living it personally
Yeah.
inside and I know I don't mean that's the way they intended it, but
Right.
that's the
Right.
way it feels and how it's perceived
Mhm.
sometimes when we're still struggling with getting our head wrapped around the diagnosis.
Yeah. And the moral of that story, again, that we want to share and why we're talking about this is there's just not one version of prostate cancer,
Right.
that this is so much more complicated than I ever realized. I didn't know I was going to become an expert on prostates, but I am now. But there's so much to know about that. And so, again, we just want to make sure just because you have somebody that you go, oh, well, my neighbor had that and this is what happened. Everybody's an individual, their journey's individual, the cell types are different. What point along the journey of your cancer it also changes the outcomes. So then let me ask you, what is the thing that's been the hardest in this process for you?
I'm gonna say sexually, those are the kind of hardest things to wrap your head around. Obviously the prostate gland is what produces semen, and not having that function anymore is it's a hard thing to adjust to.
Mm.
So I mean, It's a man's identity, obviously. So, but again, I try and keep things in perspective and understand that with a prostate, if I still had it in there, I probably wouldn't be here
Mhm.
having this beautiful conversation with my beautiful wife. So
Mhm.
it's a choice, and sometimes there's hard choices. But if you weigh the options, and everybody's choice is different because the circumstances are different. I will reiterate again that the prostate cancer can be treatable, but
Mhm.
it's also 100% dependent most often when you catch it, when you identify it,
Mhm.
and early diagnosis in all cancers, but especially in prostate cancer,
Mhm.
is absolutely essential for
Mhm.
longevity and survival.
So the thing that's creating the most stress at this stage.
Well, I am cancer free at the moment. I'm a number of PSA checks and still undetectable.
Yay.
Yeah, yeah, and we celebrate every victory
Every 3 months.
every 3 months. You put it in the back of your mind after you get a good score, and you celebrate the moment, and you move on, and you put it in the back of your mind, and then as you watch the calendar, it comes to the forefront of your mind again, and it's that the possibility of recurrence is always there in the back of your mind,
Mhm.
and I try and be as positive as I can.
So my last question is really more about our journey, and for me, and I even this is one of the other episodes that was recorded, was the experience of you're scared, you get overwhelmed, and we showed up for the first time in that cancer waiting room. And for me, it was a experience that I think changed me in so many ways. And the reason that the episode is called There's No Small Talk in a Cancer Waiting Room is because people were so genuine. There was no time for, "Hi, how you doing? Fine, how are you?" There was just no energy for that. It was right down to the core honest conversations about, not just how are you in a greeting kind of way, but how are you, meaning how was the sleep last night? How's the bladder feeling today? It was all of that. And for me, that was the hidden gift. Not that we would choose this, but I think in many ways it's reminded me about the fragility and the authentic core goodness of human beings.
Right,
And that was a real gift wrapped in here for me.
100%. Yeah, I think, kinda going back to the diagnosis, it feels very, isolating, knowing I know statistically the numbers there's millions of people in this country that deal with cancer, I get that, but when it's your diagnosis, you feel alone initially. Even though I had 100% beautiful support, it feels like you're carrying that heavy burden all by yourself,
Mm.
and, the very, heartwarming, gratifying thing is that it becomes a brother sisterhood in that waiting room of people that reach out and care, and we're all in the same boat. You don't feel isolated. We talk about what happened yesterday, how was your treatment, how was your bladder, and, all personal things that you wouldn't typically talk about ever with any other person outside of your family, and yet it's it's very cleansing, it's very comforting to be able to share that journey with a whole bunch of other
Mhm.
people because you don't feel as alone,
Yeah.
and that was, I think, one of the greatest things that, having the support of my beautiful wife, my beautiful family, and some amazing friends that I love like family, that were also helping shepherd us through this journey and kind enough to be able to drop everything they were doing on certain days when I was going under radiation and drive me down there when my wife had schedule conflict. And at the end and the culmination of all of the treatments, they organized a group, excuse me, they organized a group gathering and surprised me when I came off the elevator in the lower level at Seidman Cancer Center for my final treatment, and there was probably 25 family and friends there to celebrate the ringing of the bell with me, and that also is probably one of the most uplifting spiritual feel.
Well, thank you, sweetie, for sharing not only just the story, which is, it's our story, but I think for people listening, I hope that they're going to hear something in there that makes a difference or makes a change or makes you pick up the phone to a doctor, get your appointments, and know that the process is not a simple, easy one, but it's an important one. And I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing some very personal things because I know that there are a lot of listeners out there. I hear them from the men that I work with who this is not how they want to talk about these things. It does change their identity, but it doesn't have to. You're more than one thing. You're more than just your bladder. You're more than just sexual functioning. You're more than just your prostate. So I hope somewhere in there that hearing you share your vulnerability with that it helps other people. So thank you so much again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for spending your time with us today. Before you go, if this episode touched something real in you, please consider sharing it with someone who may need that too. If you'd like to stay connected beyond the podcast, sign up for my email list at drloristevick.com. That's where I share more reflections, resources, and an invitation to join the real conversation, which is my free live monthly gathering for women who want deeper conversations beyond the podcast. Until next time, be brave enough to be real.